very happy to be here today with you. I would like, as presented, I'm Pascal Maillot. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit for High Performance Computers and Quantum Technologies in the European Commission. And today, during I think I have 20 minutes, I would like to present you the different initiatives that we have in quantum technologies in the EU, and also I will talk about high performance computer and the hybridization with quantum computer. So quantum in Europe over the years, I think for most of you, this is very well known. What we call the first quantum revolution. If you listen to our Nobel Prize winner Alain Aspect, he often explains that in his different presentation. We estimate until 1960. Then the first quantum program for the EU began in 98 until 2010. It was mainly focusing on basic science. The second quantum revolution, that we can sometimes call applications of all this knowledge, is estimated at that it began in 2010 until now. The EU followed this carefully. As I said, until 2010, we were more focusing on basic science, but from 2010 to now, we published a quantum flagship that was based on the Quantum Manifesto in 2016. Quantera to have a different initiative involving the different member states, and the quantum flagship in 2018. I will give more details in the next slide. We have also an objective in the digital decade is to have by 2030 the first quantum computer being at the cutting edge of quantum, and it's not written here, but in 2025 the hybrid HPC and quantum computer. So about excellence in Europe compared with the other continents, the EU is very, very well placed in the game, if I can call it a game, of quantum technologies in terms of publications and in terms also of investment. The public investment for the EU and the different member states, we estimate it at 7 billion euros. We are investing more than the United States, for example, and public funding. These graphs indicate 15 for China, but between you and me, I have some doubt about this figure for China. So Europe might be the first one in terms of public funding. In terms of startup, we have, and quantum companies, not even only startups, we have 25% of the worldwide companies which are in Europe. More than 150 in 2022. This is, of course, great and shows that we have a very strong research in quantum that can lead to the creation of spin-off or startups. However, not written in this slide, in terms of funding, then now I talk funding meaning private also, we just have 5% in Europe, so we have an issue with the private funding. The perspective for the future are huge. You can see some estimation here for until 2030, with an exponential growth estimated until 2030. And what I said a bit before, in the European Union, we have the highest concentration of quantum talent, which is a good news, because we need, of course, more and more talents to have quantum technologies really grow in the EU. Of course, the drawback is that we often see some countries coming in Europe to try to make their shopping list of our researchers. But it's our objective, of course, to make the EU as attractive as possible, so that the researcher stays in Europe. So the quantum flagship, as I mentioned, the quantum flagship from 2018. In fact, the idea is to really have the quantum, to build a quantum ecosystem. It's not only investing in basic science. It's so it goes from, of course, science, but then also industries, companies, supply chain in Europe, with access to finance for all these companies and startups to grow in a proper way. And I mentioned the researchers. Of course, we are putting efforts also on the training of students, and even engineers who would like, I would say more perhaps classical engineer, who would like to go to quantum technologies. And to have all these ecosystem working, we are also investing in the deployment of infrastructures. I will give some details later. So you see, we are really not limited to basic science. The flagship is based on 4 common traditional pillars that you see in different presentations: communications, computing, simulation, and sensor, with an horizontal task of basic science. And I was explaining that we want to build the ecosystem around it. So you see that we have infrastructures like IRIS2 and EuroQCI in quantum communication. We have the joint undertaking EuroHPC for the deployment of high-performance computers, but they are in charge also now of the hybridization of high-performance computer and quantum computer. In the domain of sensors, we are launching an initiative for space gravimetry. The CHIPS Act has also a chapter on quantum chips, because we cover in computing, we cover all the technologies, for all the most popular technologies that we currently have in the domain. And for the workforce, we have the programs for skills and education. So, and the flagship began in 2018. We are around 4 years after. We have already some great success in the different pillars. We have almost 1,600 scientists collaborating in the 31st European countries, more than 1,000 scientific papers published, 100 of patents, and 25 startups founded. This figure is very important because we are really targeting the building of an ecosystem. So to give some success stories in communication, we had successes in the QKD devices and development. in sensors, diamond quantum sensors, in computing. We have success in trapped ions with 50 qubits, and also in the domain of superconducting. And in simulation, well, you might know, for example, if I give just an example, the creation of Pascal, the company on cold atoms making simulation. So, as I said, we are investing a lot on the deployment of infrastructure. For HPC and quantum computers, in 19 and 20, we had the first round with two quantum computers, one in Gen C, simulators, one in Gen C and one in Jülich. The second round now is the installation of 6 quantum computers in the location that you see on the map, for a procurement of 100 million euros. For the status of this, in the coming weeks, we will have the signature with the hosting entity, entities that will host these computers, and then will be launched the procurement for these computers. So they are not standalone computers, there will be hybrid with HPC. And for the first round from 25, we are targeting standalone quantum computer and simulators with a budget estimated at 300 million euro. In communication, I guess you have heard about IRIS-2 and EuroQCI. EuroQCI is now part of IRIS-2. So I will focus on EuroQCI. The idea is to have a pan-European infrastructure with of quantum communication. So each member state has a program to develop its national quantum communication infrastructure, and we will interlink with these different member states on the ground, and also complemented with satellites for longer connections, because as you know, with on the ground, the max that we can have for QKD is around 100 kilometers. So that's why there will be also the space segment to complement this ground infrastructure. There will be a first generation for LEO satellite with EU technologies for the QKD technologies, and then the second generation around 28, the deployment of the full operational system. In quantum sensors, we have the objective, of course, of having more miniaturization of these quantum devices, chips fabrication for testing and experimentation. We are now working on two infrastructure deployment. One will be based on the MRI that we would like to provide in different hospitals. And we are working also on an initiative for quantum gravimeters for detection under the ground, for example, for the cycle of water. But we have in basic science, in science, in calls for science, we have programs for also accelerometers, gyroscopes, atomic clocks, etc. But the infrastructure, we are focusing quantum gravimeter and MRI. I can already announce that in the digital assembly on 15th of June in Sweden, there will be the demonstration of quantum gravimeter about what it can be done live. So this was the part of science infrastructure to use these outcomes. And we are working a lot also with our colleagues of EIB and EIF on investment in the different startups to help them grow up. For the supply chain, we have two main programs that we call Q Pilot and Q Test. The idea is to offer to the companies a structure where they can come and test their different devices without investing in a full line. And Q-Pilot, it's the step after to be able to produce their devices. So it is a line of fabrication that will be available for companies to build their devices. Yeah, that's the last one. I think I still have 3 minutes, so if there are questions.
So thank you, Mr. Mayo, for your insights about what's happening on the European level. So does anyone has a question?
Hello, thank you very much for the great presentation. As you mentioned, apparently the big challenge for Europe is again the industrialization, so the uptake of the private investment. Do you plan to adjust your funding schemes accordingly to have a more thorough involvement of companies, and also regarding the involvement of companies in the funding schemes which you mentioned? So, for example, is in the Euro HPC and the procured quantum computers, can they be accessed by industry easily? Or how is the access towards the pilot lines or testing lines? Is it easy and low barrier access for the companies? Because as far as I know, it's mainly RTOs which build up the pilot lines. So how do you ease the involvement of the industry here?
You mentioned investment. I've not developed here several tools for funding for the growing of the industry with tools in the EIC. For example, there are tools for the beginning, and there are tools also for the scale up. For the access to Q test and Q pilot, yes, the idea is to have it accessible from for the EU entities. In fact, there will not be any barrier. For I guess for HPC, you were thinking about the procurement. There will be procurement made by the joint undertaking under our supervision, and it's open to any EU entity. There will be some restrictions about the term of being an EU entity, but if you are in the EU controlled by EU stakeholders, you are open to apply like anyone else. There is no barrier. No, the idea, as you mentioned, ecosystem. Yeah, the idea is to have an ecosystem. It means in terms of companies, startups, and bigger than startup, but also industry, and more because we would like also to have the supply chain in Europe to have a sort of autonomy, and without the industry, I don't see really how we can achieve that goal. So yes, of course, it's open.
Thanks very much indeed. If anyone wants more information about Q-Test, Q-Pilot, come to me because we're part of the consortium. But my actual question is directed to you, Mr. Maillot. you've talked about a lot about quantum, but we've now got the CHIPS Act, we've got the proposed Critical Raw Materials Act. How do you see the quantum initiatives from your directorate merging with the CHIPS Act and the new critical raw materials?
Yeah, perhaps I didn't give details about that. As you know, there is the CHIPS Act, and in the regulation of the CHIPS Act, there is a subchapter, if I can call it like that, for quantum chips with an investment of 400 million euros. So we have planned investment for our budget for the quantum chips, also based on the semiconductor. Yeah.